Hello, this is Morel Bernard with the continuation of the story, Dracula. And last words were, "Don't you mind him, sir," broke in Mrs. Tom with a cheery laugh. "He's got minding the animals so long that blessed if he ain't like an old wolf himself. But there ain't no harm in him. Well, sir, it was about 2 hours after feeding yesterday when I first hear my disturbance. I was making up a litter in the monkey house for a young puma, which is ill. But when I heard the yelping and howling, I came away straight. There was Berserker a-tearing like a mad thing at the bars, as if he wanted to get out. There wasn't much people about that day, and close at hand was only one man, a tall, thin chap, with a hook nose and a pointed beard, with a few white hairs running through it. He had a hard, cold look and red eyes, and I took a sort of mislike to him, for it seemed as if it was him as they was irritated at. He had white kid gloves on his hands, and he pointed out the animals to me and says, "Keeper, these wolves seem upset at something." "Maybe it's you," says I, for I did not like the airs as he give himself. He didn't get angry, as I hoped he would, but he smiled a kind of insolent smile, with a mouth full of white, sharp teeth. "Oh no, they wouldn't like me," he says. "Oh yes, they would," said I, in an imitation of him. "They always likes a bone or two to clean their teeth on about tea time, which you has a bagful." Well, it was a odd thing, but when the animals see us a-talking, they lay down. And when I went over to Berserker, he let me stroke his ears same as ever. That there man came over and blessed, but if he didn't put in his hand and stroke the old wolf's ears too. "Take care," says I. "Berserker is quick." "Never mind," he says. "I'm used to 'em." "Are you in the business yourself?" I says, taking off my hat, for a man what trades in wolves. Ascertain is a good friend to Keeper. "No," says he, "not exactly in the business, but I have made pets of several." And with that he lifts his hat and perlite as a lord and walks away. Old Berserker kept looking after him till he was out of sight, and then went and lay down in a corner, and wouldn't come out the whole evening. Well, last night, as soon as the moon was up, the wolves here all began a-howling. There wasn't nothing for them to howl at. There wasn't no one near except someone that was evidently a-calling a dog somewheres out back of the gardens and the park road. Once or twice I went out to see that all was right, and it was. And then the howling stopped. Just before 12 o'clock, I just took a look around before turning in and bust me. But when I came opposite to old Berserker's cage, I see the rails are broken and twisted about, and the cage empty. and that's all I know for certain. Did anyone else see anything? One of our gardeners was a-coming home about that time from a harmony, when he sees a big grey dog coming out through the garden edges. At least so he says, but I don't give much for it myself. For if he did ever never said a word about it to his missus when he got home, and it was only after the escape of the wolf was made known, when we had been up all night a-hunting of the park for berserker, that he remembers seeing anything. My own belief was that the harmony had got into his head. Now, Mr. Builder, can you account in any way for the escape of the wolf? Well, sir, he said with a suspicious sort of modesty, I think I can, but I don't know as how you'd be satisfied with the theory. Certainly I shall, if a man like you, who knows the animals from experience, can't hazard a good guess at any rate. Who is even to try? Well then, sir, I accounts for it this way. It seems to me that here wolf escaped, simply because he wanted to get out. From the hearty way that both Thomas and his wife laughed at the joke, I could see that it had done service before, and that the whole explanation was simply an elaborate sell. I couldn't cope in badinage with the worthy Thomas, but I thought I knew a surer way to his heart, so I said, Now, Mr. Builder, we'll consider that first half-sovereign worked off, and this brother of his is waiting to be claimed when you've told me what you think will happen. Right you are, sir, he said briskly. You'll excuse me. I know for a chaffin of ye, but the old woman here winked at me, which was as much as telling me to go on. Well, I never, said the old lady. My opinion is this, that ere wolf is a lidding off somewhere. The gardener what didn't remember said he was a galloping northward faster than a horse could go. But I don't believe him, for you see, sir, wolves don't gallop, no more nor dogs does. They're not been built that way. Wolves is fine things in a storybook, and I dare say when they gets in packs and does be chiving something that's more afraid than they is, they can make a devil of a noise and chop it up, whatever it is. But Lord bless you, in real life a wolf is only a low creature, not half so clever or bold as a good dog, and not half a quarter so much fight in him. This one ain't being used to fighting or even to providing for himself, and more like he's somewhere round the park a-hiding and a-shivering off, and if he thinks at all, wondering where he's to get his breakfast from. Or maybe he's got down some area and is in a coal cellar. My eye won't some cook get a rum start when she sees his green eyes shining at her out of the dark. If he can't get food, he's bound to look for it. And mayhap he may chance to light on a butcher's shop in time. If he doesn't, and some nursemaid goes a-walking off with the soldier, leaving off the infant in the perambulator, well, then I shouldn't be surprised if the census is one babby the less. That's all. I was handing him the half-sovereign when something came bobbing up against the window, and Mr. Blider's face doubled its natural length with surprise. God bless me, he said, if there ain't old Besker come back by himself. He went to the door and opened it. A most unnecessary proceeding, it seemed to me, I've always thought that a wild animal never looks so well as when some obstacle of pronounced durability is between us. A personal experience has intensified rather than diminished that idea. After all, however, there is nothing like custom, for either builder nor his wife thought any more of the wolf than I should of a dog. The animal itself was as peaceful and well-behaved as that father of all picture wolves, Red Riding Hood's quondam friend, whilst moving her confidence in masquerade. The whole scene was an unutterable mixture of comedy and pathos. The wicked wolf, that for half a day had paralysed London and set all the children in the town shivering in their shoes, was there in a sort of penitent mood, and was received and petted like a sort of vulpine prodigal son. Old Builder examined him all over with most tender solitude, and when he had finished with his penitence, said, "There, I knew the poor old chap would get into some kind of trouble. Didn't I say it all along? Here's his head all cut and full of broken glass. He's been a-getting over some bloomin' wall or other. It's a shame that people are allowed to top their walls with broken bottles. This here's what come of it. Come along, Bissica." He took the wolf and locked him up in a cage, with a piece of meat that satisfied, in quantity at any rate, the elementary conditions of the fatted calf, and went off to report. I came off too to report the only exclusive information that is given today regarding the strange escapade at the zoo. Dr. Seward's Diary, 17th September. I was engaged after dinner in my study posting up my books, which through press of other work and the many visits to Lucy had fallen sadly into arrear. Suddenly the door was burst open, and in rushed my patient with his face distorted with passion. I was thunderstruck, for such a thing as a patient getting off his own accord into the superintendent's study is almost unknown. Without an instant's pause, he made straight at me. He had a dinner knife in his hand, and as I saw he was dangerous, I tried to keep the table between us. He was too quick and too strong for me, however, for before I could get my balance he had struck at me and cut my left wrist rather severely. Before he could strike again, however, I got in my right, and he was sprawling on his back on the floor. My wrist bled freely, and quite a little pool trickled onto the carpet. I saw that my friend was not intent on further effort, and occupied myself binding up my wrist, keeping a wary eye on the prostrate figure all the time. When the attendants rushed in and we turned our attention to him, his employment positively sickened me. He was lying on his belly on the floor, licking up, like a dog, the blood which had fallen from my wounded wrist. He was easily secured, and to my surprise went with the attendants quite placidly, simply repeating over and over again, "The blood is the life. The blood is the life." I cannot afford to lose blood just at present. I have lost too much of late for my physical good, and then the prolonged strain of Lucy's illness and its horrible phases is telling on me. I'm overexcited and weary, and I need rest, rest, rest. Happily, Van Heslin has not summoned me, so I need not forego my sleep. Tonight, I could not well do without it. Telegram, Van Heslik, Antwerp to Seaward, Carfax. Sent to Carfax, Sussex, as no county given, delivered late by 22 hours. 17 September. Do not fail to be at Hillingham tonight. If not watching all the time frequently, visit and see that flowers are as placed. Very important. Do not fail. Shall be with you as soon as possible after arrival. Dr. Seward's Diary, 18 September. Just off for train to London. The arrival of Van Heslin's telegram filled me with dismay. A whole night lost, and I know my bitter experience what may happen in a night. Of course, it is possible that all may be well, but what may have happened? Surely there is some horrible doom hanging over us that every possible accident should thwart us in all we try to do. I shall take this cylinder with me, and then I can complete my entry on Lucy's phonograph. Memoranda left by Lucy Westerner, 17th September, night. I write this and leave it to be seen, so that no one may by any chance get into trouble through me. This is an exact record of what took place tonight. I feel I'm dying of weakness and have barely strength to write, but it must be done if I die in the doing. I went to bed as usual, taking care that the flowers were placed as Dr. Van Heslin directed, and soon fell asleep. I was waked by the flapping at the window, which had begun after that sleep walking on the cliff at Whitby when Mina saved me, and which now I know so well. I was not afraid, but I did wish that Dr. Seward was in the next room, as Dr. Van Heslin said he would be, so that I might have called him. I tried to go to sleep, but could not. Then there came to me the old fear of sleep, and I determined to keep awake. Perversely, sleep would try to come, then when I did not want it, so as I feared to be alone. I opened my door and called out, "Is there anybody there?" There was no answer. I was afraid to wake Mother, and so closed my door again. Then outside in the shrubbery I heard a sort of howl like a dog's, but more fierce and deeper. I went to the window and looked out, but could see nothing, except a big bat, which had evidently been buffeting its wings against the window. So I went back to bed again, but determined not to go to sleep. Presently the door opened, and Mother looked in, seeing my moving that I was not asleep, came in and sat by me. She said to me even more sweetly and softly than her wont, "I was uneasy about you, darling, and came in to see that you were all right." I feared she might catch cold sitting there, and asked her to come in and sleep with me, so she came into bed and lay down beside me. She did not take off her dressing gown, for she said she would only stay a while and then go back to her own bed. As she lay there in my arms and I in hers, the flapping and buffeting came to the window again. She was startled and a little frightened and cried out, "What is that?" I tried to pacify her, and at last succeeded, and she lay quiet. But I could hear her poor dear heart still beating terribly. After a while, there was the low howl again out in the shrubbery, and shortly after there was a crash at the window, and a lot of broken glass was hurled on the floor. The window blind blew back, and the wind that rushed in, and in the aperture of the broken panes there was the head of a great gaunt, grey wolf. Mother cried out in affright and struggled up into a sitting posture and clutched wildly at anything that would help her. Amongst other things, she clutched the wreath of flowers that Dr. Van Hesselin insisted on my wearing round my neck and tore it away from me. For a second or two, she sat up, pointing at the wolf, and there was a strange and horrible gurgling in her throat. Then she fell over, as if struck with lightning, and her head hit my forehead and made me dizzy for a moment or two. The room and all round seemed to spin round. I kept my eyes fixed on the window, but the wolf drew his head back, and a whole pyramid of little specks seemed to come blowing in through the broken window, and wheeling and circling round like the pillar of dust that travellers describe when there is a simoon in the desert. I tried to stir, but there was some spell upon me, and my dear mother's poor body, which seemed to grow cold already, for her dear heart had ceased to beat, weighed me down, and I remembered no more for a while. The time did not seem long, but very, very awful, till I recovered consciousness again. Somewhere near, a passing bell was tolling. The dogs all round the neighbourhood were howling, and in our shrubbery, seemingly just outside, a nightingale was singing. I was dazed and stupid with pain and terror and weakness, but the sound of the nightingale seemed like the voice of my dead mother come back to comfort me. The sound seemed to have awakened the maids too, for I could hear their bare feet pattering outside my door. I called to them, and they came in. And when they saw what had happened and what it was that lay over me on the bed, they screamed out. The wind rushed in through the broken window and the door slammed to. They lifted off the body of my dear mother and laid her, covered up with a sheet, on the bed after I had got up. They were all so frightened and nervous that I directed them to go to the dining room and have each a glass of wine. The door flew open for an instant and closed again. The maid shrieked and then went in a body to the dining room, and I laid what flowers I had on my dear mother's breast. When they were there, I remembered what Dr. Van Hesselin had told me, but I didn't like to remove them, and besides, I would have some of the servants to sit up with me now. I was surprised that the maids did not come back. I called them, but got no answer. So I went to the dining room to look for them. My heart sank when I saw what had happened. They all four lay helpless on the floor, breathing heavily. The decanter of sherry was on the table half full, but there was a queer, acrid smell about. I was suspicious and examined the decanter. It smelled of laudanum, and looking on the sideboard, I found that the bottle which Mother's doctor uses for her, was empty. What am I to do? What am I to do? I'm back in the room with Mother. I cannot leave her, and I am alone, save for the sleeping servants, whom someone has drugged. Alone with the dead. I dare not go out, for I can hear the low howl of the wolf through the broken window. The air seems full of specks, floating and circling in the draught from the window, and the lights burn blue and dim. What am I to do? God shield me from harm this night. I shall hide this paper in my breast, where they shall find it when they come to lay me out. My dear mother gone. It is time that I go too. Goodbye, dear Arthur. If I should not survive this night, God keep you, dear, and God help me. Join me. Join me for the next episode of Dracula. Join me for the next video of Dracula. Oh, join me then. Morel Bernard saying, join me for the next video. I'll see you then. Bye.